Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I'm with Erica Crawford, who's visiting us from New Zealand with Loveblock Farms. Perhaps that name Crawford sounds a little familiar, but we are not talking about Kim Crawford. There is a relationship that we'll learn about, but we are talking about a wonderful winery from the Marlborough region called Loveblock Farms. And Erica, welcome, and tell us about your winery.
Well, we started this a few years ago. In fact, it's a long story, of course. We, of course, sold the Kim Crawford brand, and then we were on a non-compete. But at that time, we already owned some vineyards, which they didn't buy. And we bought more. So we started establishing those vineyards at the time when we were in the non-compete. So effectively, it started around about 2008, which was when the conversion to organic farming happened as well. And then we launched the brand Loveblock here in the US in 2013.
So Loveblock, I know you're based in Marlborough, but where do you have vineyards and how many acres do you have of vineyards? And what are you growing in those vineyards?
So the whole estate comprises about 220 acres of planted vineyard land, of which 200 is in Marlborough and 20 in Central Otago. The little 20-acre Central Otago block is dedicated to Pinot Noir. In Marlborough, we plant, obviously, Sauvignon Blanc. We plant a bit of Pinot Noir, Riesling, Gewürztraminer, Pinot Gris, and a little bit of Chenin Blanc as well.
And what is your total case production?
We're just about to start harvesting in a few weeks, so we plan to pick about the equivalent of 25,000 cases worth of wine.
And I know you said your wines are available in the U.S. Are they available across the country?
In each and every state, yes.
All 50 states. Wonderful. Well, we had been talking earlier, and I know that you're originally from South Africa, and I am wondering what your first memory relevant to wine is.
Probably stealing my dad's dry sherry or something, but we, of course, grew up on Campari. And then so the migration to wine was a little bit later. I think it was Baby Sham. I don't know if people... Yeah, it was a tiny little bottle of some sparkling wine with a tiny little baby goat on. Baby Sham was the first thing I got tippled on ever.
And do you recall what the first or most memorable wine was you ever drank and the occasion?
I would have to say it was probably tasting Sauvignon Blanc for the first time in South Africa as a young person, before it took off there. Of course, by then, New Zealand was just starting out in its journey on Sauvignon Blanc, but in South Africa at the time, largely it was a very unknown or unplanted varietal.
And then in terms of traveling around the world, I mean, we're meeting here in California, you live in New Zealand. Where would you say you've drunk some of the best wines?
God, that's an unfair question. I think wherever we go, I try and drink locally, as much as we possibly can, what's grown locally. But obviously the wines from France for me is still top of the Christmas tree. But there's some amazing wines here in America, and some of the Canadian wines are quite special as well. They're doing some amazingly exciting things.
So aside from all the wonderful wines being made around the world, who do you think in terms of populations is drinking the best in terms of quality?
Very relative question. Because quality means different things to different people, of course. I think that, obviously people in Europe drink it as it's almost a pantry item and as part of a meal. But what I've seen working here in the US in the last 23 or 4 years is that the approach to wine has changed quite a lot. People are much more adventurous in their choices. People are veering away a little from the really big over-oak wines and really big reds. So I think that the palate in the US changed quite a lot. And people are drinking a little bit more wine as well, as opposed to, I don't know what, I think they're moving away from beer. Yeah.
So if we were to come visit you in your home, in your cellars or refrigerator or wherever you store wine, what would we find in there?
Kim's a big lover of big Italian reds and Bordeauxs. So there's a bit of that stashed away. For me, I really like Riesling. I like Chenin Blanc. I like I like some of those odd little varietals, and they're from all over the world. That's what you'll find in our home.
A nice diversity of wines.
Yeah.
So do you think there's a such thing as a perfect variety?
Different strokes for different folks. I love Riesling, but really hard thing to sell. So obviously not everybody loves it. But I think in terms of wine, the perfect wine is about balance. Just like if we look at the vine, the plant, it's about the balance between fruit and foliage. If you don't have that balance right, the flavors in your wine's going to be wrong. And then it comes to the winery where you have to balance out the acid and the flavor. And that's the main thing for me, acid and flavor.
And is there any particular grape that you think can achieve that with ease?
I think I have a particular soft spot for Chenin Blanc. It's probably my daily tipple. The acids are really aggressive. So even if it comes from warmer areas, there's still enough acid to carry it and have that balance. Mm-hmm. And Riesling, of course, because it just has everything in my book. Yeah.
That's the closest thing to a perfect variety.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have an opinion? I know a loaded question about wine critics and scores.
You're giving me very difficult questions today. I think what I've seen, and it's not aimed at anyone, but I think that often, not everybody, but, we all develop colloquial palates. So, in the US, people tend to like the bigger wines, and in Europe it's different. Mm-hmm. So what I can tell you is it does help to sell wine. It's amazing. I guess it gives consumers guidance as to what is regarded as good and what's not regarded as good. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you were telling me one of your favorite wines is Riesling and you love Chenin Blanc. If I were to ask you red, white, or rosé, is it fair to guess that white would be the preference, or might there be a different answer?
No, definitely white. Definitely white.
And still or sparkling wine?
Probably mostly still, although I do like champagne.
Yeah, it's hard to not like those bubbles.
Absolutely.
Occasionally.
It's good for your skin.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that a proven fact? So I had the pleasure of enjoying a glass of your Pinot Gris the other day with some food, and we actually had it with with pizza, the Pinot Gris, and it was so beautiful. And I'm wondering how you approach food and wine pairings. Do you think there are hard and fast rules that we have to follow, or do you look for something else when you're pairing wine with food?
I think I sat in a wonderful discussion led by Tim Hanney the other day, where he brought up the quote, "The role of hospitality is the diner, not the dinner." So if someone likes, and we have seen this, so sometimes, people like to drink a big red wine with fish, then do it. For me, I think there are two base wines that cover a lot of choices. And the one is Sauvignon Blanc, because it's got enough acid to carry a lot of food. It's big enough to carry a lot of food. So it can cover everything from, white seafood, vegetables. For me, the only thing you can eat with lettuce leaves, by the way. It can carry food with a little bit of heat. It can carry food with creamy flavors, and it can carry, bigger flavors. So that's probably the most versatile white, I think. Probably also the one I work with most, and being from New Zealand. And red, I have to say, is Pinot Noir, because the flavors that can cover is everything from fishy fish, the strong flavored fish, right through to steak. And again, it's dependent on acid. The other thing I always do is I put lemon on everything.
So you're adding acid to your food as well?
I do, yeah. I do like it, especially with meat, it just ties the acid from the meat to the wine. Not from the meat, but that you put on the meat. Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
Absolutely. So what do you think that someone who has never had your wine is missing out on?
I think it's a different expression of particularly New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. With the flavors, we don't aim to have the flavors really big grapefruit or really big grass or really big, herbaceous flavors. It's more constrained, and it has more flavors of peach and passion fruit, and it has texture and mouthfeel. So I think that's the biggest thing for me is the different style that we're evolving into now.
So something they wouldn't necessarily expect.
Definitely not. No, that's been said. It is a bit unexpected. Yeah.
So if space aliens were to land on your property, of the wines in your portfolio...
Sorry?
If space aliens were to land on your property, which of the wines in your portfolio would you want to present to them?
There's a little sweet wine that we have in our portfolio in New Zealand, sweet Moscato, which is a Beaume de Venise style, and I would give them that because it's utterly seductive, and you will forgive anybody for anything they've ever done to you with a sip of that in your mouth. It is absolutely glorious.
I'm tempted. I think I need to land on your property. So, talking about vintage, you've been living in Marlborough for 20 years, I think you said?
Yeah, we've been farming there for probably more like 23, 24 years.
Okay. Yeah. So, vintage after vintage, we talk about variation, that each year offers us something different. Would you say in your experience that you see that more things repeat themselves, or is there really uniqueness from vintage to vintage?
I think Marlborough's always been known as an area that's relatively stable. You get some vintage variation, but it's not massive. However, what we have seen in the last number of years is that the climate is changing. We're getting warmer, the weather, and it's mainly warmer at night. So things are changing, and with that, we have to change the way we approach the viticulture, in other words, how we grow the vine, because, with warmer weather or with more humidity, you get more disease pressure. And so we've got to take all those things into consideration. And, of course, how it expresses in the wine. Yeah, and that's really, and every winemaker will tell you you've got good vintages and more challenging vintages. And, of course, us viticulturists would say the good vintages is all our work, and the winemakers would say the bad vintages is their good work. But that is really when the good winemakers have to step up and really sort of work with the wine, yeah.
So when it comes to harvest or harvest time, are there any signs or omens that you look for predictors of what to expect?
We largely work on, obviously, the sugar levels in the wine, sort of winter, but we taste a lot. What you don't want in harvest time is rain. We can take anything else, but rain is really, really bad, especially close to picking. But we largely look at sugar levels and flavor.
And when harvest is about to start or during harvest, do you and the winery have any traditions that you follow?
In the vineyard, the guys like to dress up in Hawaiian shirts or silly shirts on the first day of the harvest picking. They always do that. And then I always cook. The 2 dishes I always cook for everybody. But it's a pretty hectic time, and sometimes it's really contracted, We're seeing more of that happening as well, where everything gets ripe almost all together now.
You said you make 2 dishes. Are they any particular dishes?
Same thing every year. I make this South African dish called bobotie. It's a very fragrant, gorgeous, we call it mincemeat. You call it ground meat, I think. So you can look it up, spelled B-O-B-O-T-I-E.
Okay.
And it's just something, and you serve it with rice, and it's just something that's, when people are tired, and that is warm, and it gives them protein. And the other thing I think is really important is vegetables, to get that into people, and a minestrone soup, you can't go past that.
Sounds like a good meal, especially after a hard day in the harvest.
So, it's really important for people to eat well during the time because they don't sleep much.
Yeah. So as a viticulturalist and someone who spends time in the vineyards, tell me a little bit about the organics. And I'm curious also, do you talk to your grapes? When you walk through the vineyards, many have been, known for singing to their wine, talking to their wine in barrels or in the vineyard. Do you feel a certain connection with your vines?
I personally don't talk to them, but, it is that whole thing where you sort of walk, you get to know them quite well, the individual plants, and I touch them a lot. And our people touch them a lot. So there's a lot of handwork that needs to be done, especially the last period that, lift wires up. So there's a lot of handwork to be done, but I don't talk to them. What I do think is quite important is, the tanks and the barrels need to be touched quite a little bit more. That's my firm belief. Yeah. And everybody gets so busy and you don't do enough of that. It's like kissing the tanks, I always tell Kim. He thinks I'm mad.
Okay, so you don't talk to it, but you kiss it.
Yeah, that's the thing.
So when you were little, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I thought, when I finished school, I got into art school and I got into, this heavy medical science program. But my father told me that there's no work for an artist. It's not a proper job. So off I went and did these heavy science degrees, and there's still no job at the end of the line. So here I am doing something entirely different today. But what it does teach you, of course, is a way of thinking. quite a linear way of thinking.
And how did you find yourself in the wine industry then?
I'll tell you the exact story. I was doing research in cardiac medicine, and I think at the time we sort of looked at the effect of, I was doing work for a drug company, looking at the effect of a specific drug on a heart attack. And, so you induce the heart attack, and I think it was a baboon, and then you treat it with drugs and see what the effect is on that, all in the name of medical science. And I was just so sick of it, I was 24, 25, and my dad was still supporting me, and I was doing work for a British drug company, and I asked them if they've got a job for me, and they told me there's no possibility of any jobs in research at the moment. He saw in the tea room that there's a job in sales, but you don't want to do that, Erica, you're too qualified. So I went and I drew the money from my little savings account and bought a frock and went for the interview and got the job. And it was probably the best thing I ever did for myself to work with people. And that's my place.
And so now you're the face and the voice of Loveblock, but obviously very involved in everything that goes on there. So when you're not working, how do you spend your free time?
I'm really bad at that because, we're new the company, and so we do everything in the company, Kim and I. So you tend to do a lot of that sort of stuff in your free time. I'm a reader, so I quite like reading. I'm just doing 1 or 2 more papers for this viticulture degree. So that's been keeping me busy, and I quite like cooking. And that's a new thing for me, only like the last 10 years new, but I didn't grow up with a feeling for food,
Do you tend to experiment or follow recipes?
I have to follow recipes. I haven't got that intuitive thing, So at the moment I'm on a Ottolenghi bend, the cook from Israel, Britain.
Uh-huh.
Oh, God, I love the food.
Huh. And for a really romantic evening, what do you and Kim pull out to drink?
Probably to start with old white for me, somewhere from in the cellar. I really like bottle age on white wines. And I just want to also, I really wish people wouldn't be scared of a Sauvignon Blanc that's 2 or 3 vintages old, or anything, especially Pinot Gris. Just take it with a few years on. It's only the good, because wine's a living thing and it develops in the bottle and goes on developing. Even if you pour it in a glass, the top tastes different to the bottom, the beginning of the glass to the end of the glass. So we'll haul out probably an old white, and we've got a little vegetable garden at home, of course, so pick the vegetables and just do something at home most of the time.
Sounds like a lovely evening. And we know that Sauvignon Blanc, since that works with vegetables and lettuce.
Correct. Aged Sauvignon Blanc, preferably, yeah. But from anywhere, I like them from anywhere. And I like to try them from anywhere.
So what was the best piece of advice you ever received?
Don't stop asking why. And that was from my supervisor at MSc level at medical school, yeah.
And if you could offer advice to our listeners today, what kind of advice would you like to give them?
The more you taste, the better you get at it. And it really is true. And also the other thing, whatever food you put in your mouth, smell it first and just put that smell in memory bank, and then you'll pick it up in wine. So the more you taste, the better you get, I promise you.
What would you say your proudest achievement is in your work to date?
Probably making that Kim Crawford wine. It was something we didn't expect. We started it with $20,000 from the little back room in our humble little cottage with 2 toddlers 13 months apart. So that's probably, I have to say, for both of us, probably my biggest, that's the thing I'm most proud of professionally.
Yeah, making a wine that is pretty much iconic and interchangeable when you say New Zealand white wine.
Correct. It really is the benchmark for New Zealand white wine in the US and in Canada. So it's really just found a home here,
Yeah.
But also given, we brought it here in 1997. So long before it became famous. It's funny, that whole thing. The harder you work, the luckier you get.
So complete the sentence for me. A table without wine is like?
I guess a skin without moisturizer.
Okay, so a VIP person from any walk of life is sitting in a restaurant. Paparazzi walk by, snap a photo through the window. And on the back of the table, in that photo, is a bottle of your wine sitting on the table. Who would you want that person to be drinking your wine?
Oh my gosh, that's another amazing question. A celebrity, you say?
Well,
a famous person.
From any walk of life, like living or dead.
LeBron James.
Really?
Yes. I think he's the most marvelous athlete that God ever put breath into. He's fantastic. So, yeah, I'd be very pleased if that happened.
That is not what I expected to hear.
There you go.
So, with climate change and everything that's happening in the world as it's changing, do you think we'll still be drinking wine in 200 or 500 years at the time, or even beyond that?
Definitely. I can't see people. I think it has something that catches people. I'm not much of a spirits drinker. It's the alcohol levels, and that's just too high for me. Mm-hmm. And I'm not much of a beer drinker. And I think there are a lot of people like me, it's basically an alcoholic beverage. But what comes with that is our association of wonderful times with friends and family. For me, it's getting home from work and relaxing, putting my feet up with that glass of Pinot Gris or Sauvignon Blanc or something. So it means different things for different people. And I think it's always meant to human a time of, it's a friend and family togetherness thing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you had to go to a deserted island and take 3 wines with you, what would those 3 wines be?
Alison, you are being very unfair to me today. I really like some of the smaller houses of champagne, some of the drier champagne. So I'll aim to have one of those. Rosé, rosé champagne. I really like that. I like the old world wines with a sort of solid ferment characteristics. So it'll be something like that. Probably something like Chenin, or probably something like Riesling. And just for a rainy day, I'll take a red, and it probably would be Pinot. Yeah, I'm very boring with my wine choices, aren't I?
No, I think that you've covered all, aspects, all angles. You've got a little bubbly, you've got a little white, a little red. You're ready for all occasions.
Yes.
You have the pleasure and privilege to travel around the world and taste wine. Is there one place that's on the top of your bucket list that you still want to explore?
I've never been to Italy. I really want to go to Italy and drink my way from the top to the bottom of the place.
A lot of drinking.
Yes. And eating.
Yes. So one last question, just before we head off here. A lot of times we make an association between wine and music, whether it's what we listen to while we're drinking wine or something that makes it think of a feeling that we have. So you don't have to get specific about songs. It could be genres, it could be styles, it could be artists. But based on some of the wines you tell me that you drink, I'm just curious what you would be listening to or what it makes you think of when we talk about music. So let's talk about that Riesling that you oh so love.
I love Riesling for its width and breadth of flavor, and I love it for its acid. So it would probably be something a little bit more acerbic, like some of those wonderful, I love Maria Makeba, which is a South African singer, or Nina Simone, one of those women, and of course Maria Callas. So I'd put those girls with Riesling.
And what about Chenin Blanc?
That's a difficult. Beethoven, probably.
Okay. And now Sauvignon Blanc, not the quintessential New Zealand style, but your Loveblock Sauvignon Blanc.
What would I put with that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. Let me think. What would I put with that? Blondie. Yes. Okay. I'm sort of a post-punk generation, and she was just great.
And rosé champagne.
Probably something a bit more cheerful. I can't get that silly song out of my head. It's not a silly song, the Lady Gaga, the Lady Gaga love song, but maybe it's that. What's it called? Shallow. Yes, since the Oscars played the other night, I can't get it out of my head.
I think that's a good song to end with, especially because I probably won't get it out of my head either now.
It's gorgeous.
Well, Erica, I want to thank you for joining us on Wine Soundtrack today. And can you tell people where they can find your wines, and is it possible to visit you?
Unfortunately, our property is really, really remote, so we don't have a tasting room yet. But the good thing is you can find the wine all over the US, in every single one of the 50 states. So if you look a little bit, you will find it.
Wonderful. Well, we'll look for your wine in the US, and some brave soul will try and find you in New Zealand.
You're always welcome.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you, Alison.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.